Mike Esneault, and welcome to the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge's AC23 Plus Artist Legacy Series podcast. This is a series where we talk to artists who are doing amazing things in the areas of the arts, including performance, education, production, as well as arts advocacy. We record this series in the Virginia and John Nolan Black Box Studio, as well as in the Jan and Bill Grimes recording studio here at the Carrie Siraj Community Arts Center. Be sure to visit artsbr.org for more information on all the great things we are doing here at the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge. Hope you enjoyed the podcast series, and thanks for tuning in.
All right. I'd like to welcome all of our AC23 Plus Artist Legacy Series viewers and listeners to another session. And this is brought or made possible by the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge. And today is a different setting than what where we usually are. So we are at Southern Arkansas University in Magnolia, Arkansas. This is my first time here, and I'm excited about this session because I have the pleasure of talking to three amazing musicians who have done and are doing great things in music. And I'm going to just start right out by introducing them. To my immediate right, I have Mr. Cully Joyce, saxophonist. And I'm going to let these guys kind of talk about their experiences and some of the highlights of their resume. And if they fail to mention things, I'll make sure they mention them. To his left, I have Mr. Mike Williams, trumpeter, and I'm just going to say it right away, trumpeter for a long career, but also 31 years with the Count Basie band. I'm really excited to talk to him about those experiences. And then to his left, I have Mr. Jason Smith, who works here at the university. And Jason, what is your official title here?
Director of Jazz, Director of High Studies.
Awesome. Yeah. So one of the things I'd like to kind of start out with is just, I think, as you're developing as a musician, those formative years are very, very important. Those first teachers that you have, some of the first experiences you have, maybe before you even start studying music, just being exposed to music and something that may have happened that said, wow, that looks cool. I want to do that. But I'm curious, Cully, with you, like, was it saxophone to begin with? How did you get into music?
Actually, I was a vocalist when I was in junior high school. I think it was junior high school. And we did some musicals and things like that, and I guess I happened to be okay. I was usually the lead part and stuff like that. So the weird thing is when I was supposed to go to the next school, the music teacher, chorus teacher, already had me pegged. She already said, you're going to be, and my natural nature of don't tell me what I'm going to do, I went into band.
Oh, so you did it out of defiance.
Exactly, right. And then, let's see, we were supposed to get in there, and they're asking, what instrument you want to play in something, and I'd heard of a saxophone, so I just said saxophone, and that's about the most I knew, and that was it.
Was it tenor to begin with?
Well, that was when I called the music store, and they asked me, which saxophone would you like to rent? And Mom goes, which saxophone? You know which one? I said, I don't know. Dad sings a tenor, so I'll take tenor. And that was a start right there.
And where was this? Like what?
It was in
where-
Miami, Florida.
Miami, Florida.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I mean, talk about a music town.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Wow. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, well, originally, I didn't want to do anything in particular, but there was the band, and I thought that would be pretty cool to be in the band. And I kind of wanted to play saxophone. Boots Randolph was yakety sax. I said, whoa, that's kind of fancy. And but we couldn't afford a saxophone, so my dad bought a Condirector for $100 from somebody at work and brought it home. So it was going to be a trumpet. So I didn't know any trumpet players, and they had some records that they had received when they bought a stereo. Store gave them a lot of free records, and there was Al Hurd on there.
Oh, wow.
And Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass.
Oh, yeah.
And Al Hurd, the stuff that he was doing. A lot of people just forget about Al from a big jumbo, they called him, from New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in a class all by himself when it came to that stuff. And I was so interested in that. And, we played the Green Hornet theme.
Right.
And I said, wow, I want to tongue fast, all of this stuff. So I got in the band, and then band director had albums. And about that time, the group Chase came out.
Oh yeah.
And we heard that. And we said, oh, everybody wanted to do that. And then there was all the big bands. So I very quickly turned into the guy that wanted to play lead trumpet and nothing else, So we were listening to Buddy Rich, Woody Herman, Don Ellis, Stan Kenton. And it was cool back then because they were still alive. A lot of young people, they don't want to listen to dead people. But the older you get, you get curious. You start listening back, and you're going to do the same thing. You say, well, where did this music come from that I'm liking? And you listen to the people that they were listening to and figure out how it all came to be, And I got to play lead trumpet in the All City Stage Band. Now, this is in Shreveport, okay? So real close to here. And I just kept going,
Yeah.
And went to college. Made first year of the All-State Band, Louisiana, whoop-de-doo, And, yeah, so I was also in the symphony, like in Shreveport. I played second trumpet for some time. Never principal. Too much pressure, And so the lead thing was, so that was like 50 years ago, almost 50 years ago. And I'm still trying to figure it out. I got here early today so I could get my horn and start over every day.
It's
You
never
start
ending.
over.
Never ending.
Yep.
What about you, Jason?
Grew up in Calhoun, Louisiana, not too far from Shreveport. And my mom wanted me to take a math class in 6th grade. And I took the math class, but all my friends were in band. And at that point, we were in a church, and it was Dr. Michael Spears was the person. He was a trumpet player, and he brought this brass quintet in, and it was the first time I'd ever heard of brass, or trumpet, really. And I just knew I wanted to do that. And so 7th grade, they put me in band, and I became engulfed in it. It just, I was looking for something. I was probably one of the younger players that was looking for something in life. And then after that, I had no other interest but music. And then got to high school, and they had a jazz band that would meet at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you had to get there early. And they were playing some stuff. And there was a radio station down in Monroe that I think still plays. It's a big band every Friday night. And my band director told me to put it on. And they were doing a telethon or something like that. And they put on this trumpet player that went wild. I'd never heard a trumpet do that before. just, I mean, crazy.
Right.
And he comes out and he says, something, something Ferguson. And I kind of scribbled down. I couldn't spell it, you know, the best I could. And my mom took me to the store where you could still, you know, they still had some albums and they still had tapes. And, you know, there was like, you know, I could rummage through that and everything. And I found one single cassette tape that had dust all over it. The Essence of Maynard Ferguson.
Right.
And I turned that on, and that was it. That was my new drug. After you hear that and that energy. And then I would try to play along with it, and then the more you play with the tape, it changes the key, so you're trying to keep changing the key. And so anyway, that was kind of the start of it.
Right.
And then kind of like Mike, and then, you know, this might lead to something else, but, you know, Mike was talking about first chair in All-State Louisiana Band. I was first chair All-State Louisiana Jazz Band.
Right.
And, but it was Mike who I heard through Bill Causey, because he would bring him in when they would put this kind of all-star big band together. And I was sitting there one time, and Mike was playing lead. He'd come off the road from Basie. You were just home, and Bill would bring you down.
Oh, yeah.
And then you were playing, and I go, I want to do that. Wow. And so that's a kind of a, I want to be Mike Williams. Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of a cool little connection. And through his band director, Jerry Griggs, he took me over one time and introduced us, and I came over and took a few lessons and everything. So, yeah, it's kind of the path of everything. And then the Air Force and all that other
That's interesting that what hooks you guys is the hearing those guys that were the legends, you know, and catching that. I think for me, what hooked me was, you know, early on in school, we already were like forming a little group and going out and playing, you know, in the area and stuff like that. Well, because of that and you know, stuff that goes along with that, my dad, who at the time would go like really late at night, he'd left my mom and he'd go really late at night into this piano bar.
Yeah.
And he'd drag me with him with the saxophone. And the pianist would sit like where you are, and he'd hold up 2 fingers down for 2 flats and 1 finger up for 1 sharp. And then I would just play all night long in the thing. But what I'm saying is what caught me, though, is those rare moments when you have that, what is it, the magic happens and the group, the zone happens.
Right.
When you're not thinking about music anymore, and suddenly you and the instrument become one.
Absolutely.
And that was it. When I experienced that a couple of times, I didn't ever want to go back because something different was just, this is incredible.
Well, one thing I'm noticing in the conversation that resonates with me, but it happened later because when I first got into music, it was, you know, my dad had 4 sisters, they're all pianists, so whenever we could do family visits, the piano was there, and I was always I'd gravitate to the instrument, even though I didn't know what to do with it. But then, you know, my parents noticed it, especially my mom, and she's like, oh, well, let's get you lessons. So I started very traditionally classical piano. And I was like, yeah, this is fun, you know, and I did it for a while, losing interest, and then I, you know, got into like Billy Joel and Elton John, you know, nothing to do with jazz, but started learning those tunes by ear, and, you know, really developing this, which drove my piano teacher nuts, because I wasn't interested in reading the music, I just kind of watch her or whatever. But it wasn't until I got to high school that we had you know, in my conversations with people in these kind of settings, you know, it's amazing how many times it comes back to a band director, you know, like, so I had a great band director, and, you know, a friend of mine said, you should come check out the jazz band, he's starting it. I had no idea what that was, didn't listen to any jazz. And he brought in, so I joined the band, and he brought in Big Dipper.
Oh, yeah.
That chart. And the first chord on there is a G13. I'm like, what?
What is that?
What is, you know? So got together with a local teacher, but he said, look, tomorrow night at LSU, Ellis Marsalis is playing with his trio. You should go check that out. I had no idea. He lived 60 miles down the road, New Orleans, of course, but it was that experience of seeing live, and in this case, you know, a very accomplished pianist, that did it for me. Like, as soon as I heard that, and then I was just, it was like, you know, it was a drug almost. I was just hooked, you know, and I learned what a G13 was real quick. And then started listening to all that music. And one thing that kind of popped up when you were saying these names is, yeah, like once you kind of get into it, and hopefully you guys are getting into it, you can go down a rabbit hole real quick of just the lineage of the music, who influenced who influenced that person, and so on. And when I think about it, like I don't really know any great musician in the jazz idiom especially who really doesn't know the history of their instrument, like all the great players. And like I was asking somebody before we started, like what piano players are you listening to? And then I was thinking about what I was saying, it's like, man, I mean, there's so many. There's such a history. Even though the music's a little over 100 years old, the history is deep. And of course the evolution of the music has happened so fast, you know, from Jelly Roll Morton to where we are now, in all the instruments and all the different ensemble type settings. But okay, so like you guys, that's how you got into music. And then what was the next stage for you guys as far as development? Like, I guess I'm talking about college experiences and what that parlayed into after that. Let's start the other way. So Jason, how about you?
So I went to college, did 2 years of college, and then won an Air Force audition. And my first station was Dayton, Ohio. And that was where some real learning came in, because college was but only 2 years of it, and then all of a sudden I'm kind of thrown into a really high dose of reality of, hey, here's this music, you have to get this ready, you know, we've got 2 days, and we've got to do this gig. And I wasn't quite ready for that, and I was 21, you know, and everybody was older, much older, had masters and doctorates, and had really gone to some amazing, amazing schools. And that's where I learned, like sitting in that section and just going, how do you do that, to the trumpet player next to me, because maybe he had amazing, you know, double tonguing or something. And then I just would go around and ask people, and I just kept my mouth shut. I never said anything. Right. I just stayed quiet, I did what I was told, and just was like a sponge. But what really hit was there was a teacher there, and he was a junior high teacher at the time. He was still teaching, but he was the lead trumpet player for the Stan Kenton Orchestra. Mm-hmm. John Harner, who's on Kenton 76. And I called him, I got his phone number, and I called him almost every other day for almost a month, and he never returned my phone call. Oh. And he finally called me late one Sunday night. And he said, really nice. He just says, I don't teach. He goes, I teach all day. I don't teach trumpet lessons. And I asked him, I said, whatever you want. I'll do whatever you want me to do. I said, I would just like a few lessons. And he says, okay, when you're not on the road, 8 o'clock in the morning at my house on Saturdays. Okay, sure, okay. So I would have to get up pretty early because he was 45 minutes away. I'd have to get up and I'd warm up to get my chops ready because he's a lead player, so we're about to pound out some notes. And 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday doesn't always feel so good. And I came in, and he lived on a farm out the middle of nowhere. And we sat there, and we would spend hours playing through charts, and he would talk about the swing elements of between Basie and Kenton, and we would play through all of this different things. And then at that point, it ended up being a few lessons, ended up being 3 years. Wow. Every Saturday. And then he got to a point where he just kind of said, I'd like to pass you on to somebody else, which was Byron Striplin. Oh, wow. Whose was like a few hours up the road. Right. And that ended up, it was a different kind of mindset versus us like kind of pounding it. It become more of a musical thought, you know, aspect of things, of how he went. And it just went, you know, I was just always hungry, more like just sponging. And so I just always played dumb, which is not, it's pretty simple for me to do that. And then just kind of just went from one person to the next and say, how do you do that? And just went home and practiced it.
There's a lot of things you said in that resonate. Like, number one, the trial by fire, like you have a concert and two 2 days. Like those experiences, I think, can really make you a player just out of necessity. Also, the determination of you calling this guy every other day and until you got what you were going to achieve. And then the associations. Like, you studied with him for 3 years, and then, that relationship led to another relationship and so on. And I would venture to guess that it's probably happened to all of us in some form or
And
fashion.
just to add one thing, Byron was still trying to do the thing that Dizzy was doing, talking about the shadow program.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of Byron's biggest thing, and being kind of brought into that old school way of doing stuff where you're not you're just sitting in the room listening to people having conversations and being quiet and listening. And that was cool to me, like kind of being part of that. And he explained it to me on the very first day. He goes, "This is my thoughts," and that was very, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Mike?
Yeah, well, after I got out of high school, I go to college, right? So I got a scholarship at Northwestern State University in Natchitoches, not Nacogdoches, and I was there working on a Bachelor of Music Education. I took 5 years because I didn't want to do any summers, not going on to college anyway in the summer. And so that time I was developing, didn't do a lot of developing there, but in some ways because we didn't have that many people. It was a good program. We just didn't have the numbers like they have 350 in the marching band now, and we had like 80 or something. Yeah, but so I was leading the jazz band, first chair in the wind ensemble, first chair in the concert band, had to do lessons, and principal's trumpet in the symphony, doing rare literature. So my chops were a mess the whole time. I had to play all the time, and I didn't have a chance to really calm down. So when I got a band directing degree at Northwood High School in Blanchard, Shreveport, North Shreveport, and that was the first time I actually started developing. I would get to school before the janitor got there to unlock the doors. I had to turn off the alarm system for the whole school. I never saw teachers and stuff. So I got there to make sure I got to practice before I let the kids in. So whatever was coming that day, I got mine first, And I did that for about 2.5 years, and was playing in the symphony also at that time, and some with Bill Causey. But I decided one October in '83 that I wasn't going to do it anymore. So I just went ahead and cut to the chase. I quit in the middle of football season, marching band and all that. There's a few tears and stuff, band parrots and all that. But had to get on with my life because I said, okay, I'm not going to do this. I want to play the trumpet, and I got one last chance. I was like 24 years old. So some people said, come on to North Texas. And I said, oh, I don't know if I'm good enough, I wonder if I could make a band. They had 9 lab bands and 4 reading bands. And so I went there, had my $3,000 from retirement from Louisiana, and that got me in out-of-state tuition and all that stuff. And the first band was the 6 o'clock lab band, the 6th one, playing lead trumpet. And back then, they were swinging all the way down to the 9 o'clock,
Yeah.
And I did that. Oh, it was so cool, man. I was living the dream. But I was the old guy. I was like 26 or something. Anyway, and then I got to be in the 3 o'clock, and I said, oh, this is serious business here. And then lo and behold, then the next year, I auditioned, and I made second in the 1 o'clock. And I saw that, and I said, oh, second trumpet. 1 o'clock band, I'll take it. And Frank Green was playing lead. If you know Frank Green, he had a good gig with, what was it, the late
David
show.
Letterman.
He finally made the David Letterman show, and then Dave quit. And so the last 2 years, I was in that 1 o'clock band, working on a master's in jazz studies. Had no interest in getting the master's, but I had to do something to get in there, right? And if I'd have gotten a master's, I would have failed. I didn't know what was going on because nobody had computers, no phones. You went where the phone was ringing. Well, the phone was ringing at North Texas in the jazz office. People were getting gigs, you know? And Neil Slater was conducting the 1 o'clock band, and we did some great albums. And it was a great band. I mean, everybody in that band went on to do something big. We did with respect to Stan. We played Stan Kenton music with the Papyrus. They had just gave them the music and all these great lead parts. And did a live in Australia and, of course, the spring regular yearly albums. So I was leading the one, and I love Neil Slater, the director of the 1 o'clock band, and I took some lessons with Don Jacoby. Yeah. I really couldn't afford to go there a lot. I was busy working at Arby's to pay my rent, 325 cents per hour. And, but things started looking up. Don Jacoby, Jake, recommended me for the Glenn Miller Band. And I said, what? Be on the road playing lead trumpet. And they were out on the road like 50 weeks a year. Mm. And that's what you, yeah, 50 weeks a year. They get a week off for Christmas and a week off to do their taxes in April. And I did that for 2 months, living the dream, making $450 a week, you know. Rooms were only $30 back then. We had three, and 3 of us would stay in the room. Those are other stories. But then I got a call from Neil Slater, and he was real terse. I love Neil. He said, I'm in Buffalo. And he goes, Mike, yeah, Neil. Hey, Neil, how's it going? Frank Foster's going to call you. Frank Foster was the leader of the Basie band at that time. Yeah, he says, looking for a lead trumpet player. Yeah, tell him you want $750 a week. Okay, all right, click. And so they called me, and right in the middle of the road, Dick Gerhardt, Zoot, we called him, released me in less than 2 weeks. You know, usually you give a 2-week notice. So I had to get all my stuff, and I met the Basie band in Billings, Montana, with a stack of music, and I didn't know where to even start. I wasn't listening to a bunch of Basie, you know. And so I got some real good, an 8 CD collection of all the Blue Note stuff they did, the sets, not the album, but the sets that they made the Birdland album out of. Snooky Young played leads, so I was listening to all of that big time and trying to understand all of the phrasings and stuff like that. So that was in the summer of '87, and the rest is history.
How much time did you have to prep for that first gig?
I don't know. I guess when I got to the hotel room before the gig, I didn't know where to start, you know. The second gig, the second night was a 4-hour dance. They used to do a lot of dances. So that was a lot of music. Well, I just come from the 1 o'clock band. And to get in the 1 o'clock, you have to read.
Yes. Ink on a page.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
You have to read fly shit.
Yep.
Okay?
Rorschach.
And I tell you what, I used to sight read, and when you got to learn to read, let me tell you what, you better go out and get the Charlie Parker's Omni book in your key, and get a metronome, and open that thing, and have your metronome on, and start reading. And the rule is you can't stop. And so I read so much music, and so when we got in the 1 o'clock band, and Neil was so dark that when we would do a concert with the 1 o'clock band, he would pass out a chart, a really hard chart for us to sight read on the concert, but wouldn't tell the audience we were sight reading. That's dark, but we could do it, you know. So I could read. So right then, I was just trying to learn the style. And I learned from the old guys, and they were my brothers, you know. For 31 years, man, they were my brothers. And Sonny Cohn had been there since 1961, and you've heard of all the phrasing for the Basie band. He would say like, "Okay, Mike." Now, he played third trumpet and lead on all the ballads. He wouldn't let anybody play a ballad. So he said, "When I lead forward, something's about to happen." So I was all ears. I didn't ask any questions about what do you do here, what do you do there. You shut your mouth and listen. And this, you should remember this. If you're playing in a band and the lead player's doing something, I said, "Now what are you doing here?" They asked me, you know, like, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I don't know, but one thing I can tell you, I'm going to do it the same way next time." You know, that's a lead player's job. So you have to listen and shut your mouth, you know. And yeah, when he'd lead forward, it would be, ba-doo-da-doo-da-doo, da-doo-da-da-da, and we'd go, and then we'd do-do-da-da-da, boop-ba-da, you know, play right. Laying back is not dragging, okay? You just relax it and just a hair behind, but you have to listen to everybody. So I was all ears. And I was such high anxiety for the first 5 years because I'd wake up in the hotel and say, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" You know, I'm playing lead in the Basie band, and Snooky Young he was the lead player, and now I'm trying to fill his shoes, you know. It got better, and, you know, after about 20 years, then then I wouldn't shut up, you know. But after 20 years, doing those charts hundreds of times, when it would get time to play a concert, I felt like, you ever seen Michael Jordan at the beginning of a game run out on the basketball court like he was going to destroy? That's how I felt, man. I said, "All right, let's do this," you know. But what was the question?
Well, I'm about to ask the same question to Cully.
Okay.
Well, so Cully, like, what was the transition for you, like, from, you know, college, and tell us about the college experience into the first, you know, professional situation?
Yeah, so I was taking lessons from a teacher in South Carolina. I had gone to live with my grandmother, and he was a really great teacher, fantastic gentleman, good musician and all that. And I had planned to go back to Miami because that's where I come from, and I was going to go to the University of Miami. Mm-hmm. And he said, you know, and he had a son who was Danny Leonard, who's actually a big bass player as well. I think he played with Amy Grant and all kinds of, yeah. He said, "My son's going out to North Texas State. The good thing about being out there is you're kind of in the center of everything going on. There's a lot of guys that coming in there and grabbing folks and doing all this kind of stuff." And he kept at me for a bit, and then I said, "Okay, sounds great. I'll go out there with Danny." And I actually roomed with him, I think, the first semester. So I was out there about 3 or 4 years. I didn't finish because I was starting a family, so it was time to get a job. So I got out and started a job. I got a couple of jobs, and then I was doing a little band directing thing, and then I got into a management position in a Christian bookstore. And it was retail, and it was just like, oh my gosh, you know, day in, day out kind of stuff. And finally somebody told me, said, "Look, you need to go and take what you do. You are a music lover. You thrive on music. You need to go and audition for the Air Force. This is just down the street. You know, you can get over there and audition for the Air Force and get in the band." And I thought, Air Force? What the heck? Military? You got to be kidding. So anyway, I went to, I guess I saw a recruiter or something, and they said, "No, you need to go set up an audition with a thing." And I did that, and the closest one happened to be Barksdale. Mm-hmm. So I can remember going, and I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't have anybody to, you know, lay down the route and tell me what I'm going to do. So I went out there, and I remember it was a rainy day, and I knew my audition was about, I don't know, hour and a half away or something like that. Totally rainy day. So I, not knowing what I can do, I went and parked my car under a bridge, and I practiced for about 45 minutes before getting, because I didn't know if they'd have anything ready for me or what was going to happen when I walked in there. So
you had no clue going into this what you had to do.
I didn't know what, I mean, I'm preparing, I know what I can do and that kind of stuff. But when you get there, they hand you music. They say, can you sight read this? Can you play with the band? Can you do this? Can you improvise this? Blah, 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 blah. And, they took me right in and that kind of stuff and went forward from there. And then, the next 20, then 30 years, I guess, total, I couldn't recommend it higher for me in my situation. Because I dealt basically only with music. Either I was playing in a band or I was running a band, I was leading a band, or I was writing. I was in the back writing arrangements and stuff like that. And
Was that your first opportunity to start arranging for
Yep.
a band, was in that setting?
Yep.
And that's a real blessing. Yeah, I'd love to arrange as well. And there's something to be said for when you write an arrangement and you hand it to musicians who are great musicians, because it can go the other way too.
Yes.
But you can write a nice arrangement, but if it's not, if it's students or some, younger students, you might not get a good representation of what the chart is.
Correct.
So that was a real blessing
Oh,
to be able to write for that ensemble.
For 20 years writing for some fantastic musicians. And with the rehearsal time.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, to work it out and make it happen. Oh,
That was kind of my experience, because I spent a short time in North Texas too, and mainly went there for arranging. And to be able to write a chart and hand it to the 1 o'clock sometimes, and I'm
gosh.
like, wow, like I didn't even know it could sound like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's better than you could
And great
imagine.
musicians just bring something to the music
Yep.
that you can't put on paper,
Yep.
obviously.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, might kind of pick on you for a little bit, because you have such such a history with that band. This is one of the greatest jazz, big bands, swing bands in the history of jazz. Count Basie, come on. So, I mean, just paint a picture for me, like being on the road for that long, and I mean, you're talking about concerts, recording sessions, all of the guest artists that would come through that band. Like, what are some? Let me just ask you this: like, what are some of the most memorable experiences where it's just like you got chills because you can't believe you're in this situation? Does some come to mind?
You're talking about the music end of it, right?
Yes. Well, okay, yes.
Okay, first of all, the names, Dizzy Gillespie. and
Okay,
Bill-
you got to talk about that. I mean, what was that like?
On the we did in '89, I believe we did a Columbia Artist Tour, the Basie Band. We started in California, and it was going to be 2 months on the bus the whole time. I think we did about 25 states, and we ended in New Jersey with a quick shot up the Thanksgiving to Ottawa. And we were doing we would do the Basie set, and did Billy Eckstine. I mean, he's familiar with Billy Eckstine. He's one of the original crooner guys, and he paired well with Sarah Vaughan. Okay, they had a thing going musically. But what about Dizzy Gillespie? How many? Okay, they did call him Dizzy for nothing. Man, and he must have been about 70, and he was still hitting it. And so that was a really great experience. Mm-hmm. Shall I tell them the story?
Tell us a story. Come on.
Okay. This is what you really want to hear, right? So, Dizzy was crazy, and in a way. We're working about every night, and we're in somewhere like in the Midwest somewhere at a big hall, like 2,000 seats. It's probably 1,500 people there. And Dizzy Gillespie had his horn, and he had a wireless mic on it, but it clamped on. It was like one of the first generation ones with the big box down there with the antenna next to the guitar. So Billy Eckstine goes out and does his first set, blah, 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 blah. And then Dizzy would close out the show with his Night Tunisia, Things to Come, the real stuff. That ain't Basie at all. But we had a blast doing that part. Of course, we did our own set first. So Billy's out there, beautiful girl, and doing all of this, and you could hear in the house, that giant theater, you could hear what's that? And Carmen Bradford, the vocalist, the bass of it was going like that and pointing down toward the antennas. And one of the guys almost broke his neck trying to get there to yank the cord out. And we said, wow, what was all that about, you know? So it was over, intermission, so we got off. And what it was, Dizzy Gillespie had taken his wireless mic and went in the bathroom and was flatulating on it. You can't make that up. You can't make that up at all. And I'm telling you what, I could tell stories all night about stuff like that, the road. You know, so that was a funny moment, you know, but the sheer musicality from Dizzy, you know. And we worked with Sarah Vaughan a lot.
Oh, my gosh.
Ella Fitzgerald. We got to work with Ella Fitzgerald.
Wow.
In Royal Albert Hall. You know that place? The Beatles sang about it. And a huge place, a lot of history in there with Keter Betts on bass, Mike Wolford here, and I forget the drummer's name. But anyway, we did our set, and then we got to back up Ella. And Ella is just, you can't beat Ella, you know? And I was so shy, I'd go up to her, hey, Miss Fitzgerald, you know, it's so fun to play blah, blah, blah. And I think she was just as shy as I was. But
Really?
she was always like that. Carmen Bradford used to tell me about Ella. Like, she'd go talk to her, and like one time, and she was walking around, she had this handkerchief all the time. And she said it was for security. Carmen told me that. And she's talking to Carmen. I just hope they like me.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Holy cow.
Wow. And recording. Let's see, I think I'm on 28 recordings with the Basie Band, and out of that, 7 Grammy nominations and 3 Grammy winners. And one of the winners was George Benson. George Benson and the Big Boss Band. It's what we did a European tour and a Japanese tour, and that was just a blast beyond belief. And I could go on and on about the people that we played with. Of course, Frank Sinatra, Radio City Music Hall, and that was very special, you know. I mean, Frank, come on, you know, and his phrasings and all of that with Frank Jr. conducting the symphony, and he had his own guys, but when it was Frank's turn to do the show, we'd start out. He would go ahead and supplement some Basie guys in there instead of the local. So one time I got to do it with Buddy Childers playing lead. I got to play second. Walt Johnson playing lead, and I played second under that. But I remember that, I forget which run it was. We always did 5 shows a week in Radio City, huge stage, and it would be sold out. But I remember milling around backstage before the hit one night. I saw this light all by itself in a dark corner, this little bitty table, and on that table was 1 glass of Jack Daniels neat, 1 glass of Jack Daniels on rocks, and 1 non-filter Camel, and 1 cheap book of matches. And I finally dawned on me what that was. I was like, oh my God. You know, it was like, you know, I would have taken a picture if they had cell phones yet. So Frank would always come out on the stage and then put the spotlight on him. He's going, it's 2:45.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
No one in the joint but you and me. It's 1 for my baby. He walk out there with a scotch, the non-filter. So he's the only one that got to smoke on stage. But stuff like, little things like that, I want to never forget.
I've always heard about Frank, like he just had a tremendous amount of respect for the band. Like he would go out of his from what I read in the early days, especially when the band would have to stay. It was predominantly a black band. They have to stay in a different hotel and these kinds of things. And
Oh, yeah.
he really stood up for the musicians.
Frank had a lot of power, and he probably fancied himself to be in the mob. But if you watch the documentaries, maybe he rubbed elbows. But he was very generous, and there's some other stories that maybe he, maybe caused a few problems in some tours. But generally, he was very generous. Palm Springs, a guy about to lose his house, and the guy gets word that his house has been paid for. And that was Frank. He would do stuff like that at the drop of a hat. Mm. So he was really fun to work with. He was getting up there later in years. But,
What were the recording sessions like? Were they kind of intense, or was it more a relaxed vibe? Or?
I would just say it was very professional. We'd be doing some laughing in the booth or whatever, and most of the time we went to record, it was new music, so we were sight reading too, but it wasn't anything just terrifying like some of the really fast tunes, George Benson stuff. It was like all playable, and me being the lead player, the lead player is a strange bird for wanting to put himself out there like that in the first place, because you can have chop problems and you miss one note, everybody knows it. If you're down in the section, you might get by with not being perfect, So when you go in that studio, it's got to be perfect. And pray to God, I did. I said, Lord, please help us to have a producer that is not going to let my stuff get out there if I had something. Because a lot of times you make mistakes, and you want to fix them. Well, time is money, and a lot of times they don't want to fix it. But Greg Field, he was a great producer of our albums, and I knew Greg would take care of me. He said, don't worry, Mike, we got you. And I never had to do it much. He said, if there's anything wrong and we're gone, you call me, and I'll fly out on my nickel. It's before everybody had their stuff at home, these little studios after the COVID. Because I don't want you getting Wayne to play my parts. Because I'm sure he would. And
is there a certain mindset that you go into a recording session with because of those factors? Obviously, you're in good health, right? Like you're taking care of yourself, your chops and everything.
Yeah, well, I would definitely take care of stuff like that. And this is another bunch of stories about being on the road and having to do. When the red light is on, you better be on, So depending on when it was, I would get up at 4 a.m. or 5. I've done 5 a lot of times in the hotel room before we get to the studio, and I put my Harmon mute in. I don't like practice mutes because it fools you. Practice mutes have a little back pressure. I didn't need anything messing with my airstream. So I'd put that on and play pianissimo, which is a good thing to do, especially at 5 a.m. with neighbors. And back then, or now, you could turn on the TV, and if you go to the Wii station or whatever they had back then, there was always the Rifleman or Wagon Train, all of those kind of things. It was, and I would turn it up just enough to where it wouldn't maybe bother the people trying to sleep, but I could play with that sound, and they wouldn't know it was a trumpet, because if they knew there was somebody practicing, they'd call. And I used to get calls from security, but by the time security would get to my room, I was done warming up. So I made sure it was like 30 minutes or something. And we'd get to that studio, and I would just try to focus, try not to get nervous. And I did it so many times to where when I would get to a studio, my whole body would go like, okay, now it's time to go, But you couldn't depend on the producers taking care of you like Greg Field took care of me a few times with Pro Tools and all that. But a lot of times they didn't want to do that. And we didn't piece things together. We had to do beginning to end. No stopping and okay, now we're gonna do this. If you messed up, you started over. They wanted one take, you know. So the pressure was definitely on.
From an arranger standpoint, because you said a lot of these charts might be new charts in the studio, was there, I'm just curious, because I mean, obviously these are probably some of the best arrangers to arrange, but were there instances where you all were working out arrangements in the studio, or it was just...
Oh, none of that BS.
Right.
No, it was business. When you got there, the music was on the stand, pencils ready to go. Alan Ferguson, you know, you don't know it, but you've heard some of his stuff if you've watched some old Hollywood shows. But he did a whole album, him and Bob Ojeda, with it's called Basie Plays Duke, I think. So we did all Duke Ellington charts. And Alan was there, you know. And lo and behold, I think we won a Grammy on that one. And so that was fun. I haven't heard those things. I don't sit around listen to those things. I just keep them in the archives. I should pull them out sometime. And Nestico would come in with some new stuff. We did a Christmas album, which is killing, a very swinging, Basie Christmas. And he did a one on da-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-doo-da-ba-ba. Good King Wenceslas or something like that. And lo and behold, we won a Grammy on that one. And Sammy was a joy to watch work. He was out there, when he's the playback, he's up there going, he's always smiling, just the best cat. Yeah, we miss Sammy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, everything in the studio was straight ahead. No screwing around. I mean, we would make some jokes and laugh and all that, but the clock is ticking when you're in there, you know.
Well, all you guys can speak to this. When you're working in a big band setting and you're doing a lot of touring, and because I haven't had that experience, I haven't toured with a big band and been on the road for months at a time, years at a time, and with you guys. What is that like? Like just the dynamic of you're with the same guys for a long time, all the time. And I'm sure there's, just professional things to talk about, like, how do you maintain a gig for 31 years? There's obviously, I'm talking outside the music, just the relationships and how you carry yourself professionally and what professional musicians do in those kind of settings. Can y'all speak to that? Like some of the challenges maybe of being around the same people all the time? Because it is a big family, right, essentially?
I'll just jump in. I mean, Mike's got the Basie thing, and Cully and I had there's sometimes the military politics that you're always dealing with inside of, you just wanted to get the gig to make the music, but then there's the whole elements of sometimes the military things that you have to learn to navigate sometimes. And it was interesting to wear a bunch of different hats, one playing lead in a big band, but also being the music director. And like having that to go, and then how people would rotate in and out, and then some sax player might just had a baby, and they would get off, and then we'd have to fly somebody in, and then that personality is completely different than what you just programmed for. So it was constantly rotating. Mike, did y'all change often, or was it pretty much the same band?
When I got on the band, okay, just like all the other bands, Basie, the Basie band back in the day, they were working all year round, and maybe get off for Christmas if they didn't have a Christmas gig, which they probably did. But well, let's see, it's what was the question?
Basically, like in the Basie band, was it the stock band for quite a while? You didn't change personnel very often.
Oh, yeah. So we weren't allowed to have subs. Now, subbing is a thing. When I got on the band, we were still working 35 weeks a year, in 2 years, we were gone 40 weeks on the road. And that included overseas 3 or 4 times each year in those years. So there was no subbing because it was a big deal, because every time one person would come into the Basie band with all of those phrasings that you learn just from being there, the sound would change that much. And that's the dangers of subbing, is especially when it's a band like the Basie bands, which requires tremendous amount of style. It would change a little bit, but some of the subs we get out, then they would learn the phrasing, and then we got more subs. So then you had your subs that you picked from, that because when we got to be like 20, 25 weeks a year or less, you couldn't blame a guy for trying to make a living, especially if he was a great person on the Basie band, but you weren't working for 8 weeks. If you were a W-2 guy like me, I got unemployment. Every time I get off the road, I file for unemployment. But it's nothing like a road band when it's you're playing every night and it's the same cats. You get one person in there. But that's just the way it is now. The bands aren't out on the road. Even the Glenn Miller band after COVID, they got down to 40. I don't even, it might be less than 30 to 40 weeks a year now.
And they're subbing guys in and out a lot.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's just the way it is. So I was so fortunate to be on the tail end of the way it used to be.
Well, we've talked a lot about, just working as a professional musician and a lot of what that entails. But I know all you guys, including myself, have done a lot of teaching. We've worked in education in different capacities, different, parts of our careers, et cetera, et cetera. But, we have students here today that are kind of checking this out, and I know later we might have some questions, but just in general, with your experiences in teaching, particularly with this kind of music, with jazz music, improvisational music, are there some just general things that you might mention to the students that you think are just critical, like especially, the dynamic of the world today, like the music business changes a lot, and it's changed quite a bit, maybe in the past 10, 20 years. But just any thoughts on that, like words of encouragement, or what are your guys' thoughts on studying music and the opportunities today and things that are very important for these students to get together?
Well, I thought I was hearing an interesting connection with several things, like Mike was talking about, and some of the stuff you as well. If you notice, several folks that are at the very top level of what they do are very nervous when they start the stuff going on. Mm-hmm. It's not, okay, just because you think you can't ever do it, that ain't true. You actually can. It's what do you want to do? How do you want to commit to it?
How bad do you want it?
How bad do you want it? That's exactly right. And another theme that goes through, if you listen to these guys especially, is they listened. They listened, they listened, they listened, they listened. The music is an oral art. Mm-hmm. You can't get it off the page. And I'll bet your band director has told you that 100 times. The music is not here, right? It's not on that page. That isn't music. That's a bunch of scribbly notes to try to keep us all in the same place at the same time. The music is what you make out of it and the creation that you do. And there's no limit to that. And that would be one of the things that I would absolutely, the listening side of it, the courage to know you can go forward if you want it badly enough, and the fact that the music comes from here. It's not what you're reading on a page.
What's your theory?
And of course, you get the question as a senior in high school, like, should I do it? How should I do it? Et cetera, et cetera. And my response to them would always be, I'm not going to tell you to do it or not do it. That's a decision you got to make. But I can tell you what I know, and the parameters of what I see today. And because I would always tell them, it's like, I love my life in music. I can't imagine doing anything else. I wouldn't want to do anything else. And it's not about the money. It's like, I just love when I'm doing it. At the same time, I'm not going to tell you go into music because, yeah, you can get an accounting degree and you can make probably 6 figures in 2 years, and that you have an infrastructure laid out for you. You don't have that so much in music today, especially. Yeah. So to me, I would always tell them, is like, that's the challenge and that's the opportunity, because if you can create your own infrastructure and you can make it, you find your strengths, you find all the right people to study with and get to know, you can make it work. If you really want to do it, you can make it work. But it ain't easy. And it all goes back to everything that these guys are talking about. It's like, you have to really want it. You got to put in the time. What is it, the 10,000 hour thing? I don't know about all that, but you got to put in the time. And one of my mentors when I was in college age was Alvin Batiste, who was a legendary jazz musician, and he had recorded with Cannonball Adderley and toured with Ray Charles and all kinds of people, clarinetist. And when I got to study with him for 4 or 5 years, I would just one-on-one, just studying. But I would walk into Southern, that's where he taught at Southern University in Baton Rouge. And at that point, he's probably in the mid-60s, he's already had his career. And he had already taught, as an educator, he taught Branford Marsalis, Wynton Marsalis, all the guys out of New Orleans. And I'd walk into the band room, and there he is practicing. He'd been practicing 2 hours, shedding on Coltrane or whatever it was. And I'd walk by and say, "Hey, Michael, what you doing?" And if you didn't have an answer, it means you were sitting next to him for the next 2 hours practicing, and it was very old school. No, it was like, "Play this." "Can you slow that down?" "No, play this." And that was our school. And that's how I learned how to listen. But again, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. And looking forward to the concert.
All right, thanks,
Friday
Mike.
night. Yeah, absolutely.
The Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge would like to acknowledge our generous sponsors, the Shell Corporation, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development, and the City of Baton Rouge.